I should point out that these continuing layoffs by state and local governments of teachers and police officers and firefighters and the like would have been even worse without the federal help that we've provided to states over the last 20 months, help that the Republicans in Congress have consistently opposed. I think the Republican position doesn't make much sense, especially since the weakness in public sector employment is a drag on the private sector as well.
That's right. Government got so much smaller, it offset private sector growth. This is public job change for the last 2 years. Here is the private sector. And how does the private sector add jobs in a recession? Government spending on infrastructure, for one thing.
I believe that instead of sitting still, we should invest in rebuilding America's roads and railways and runways. Too many American workers have been out of work for months, even years. And that doesn't do anybody any good when there's so much of America to rebuild. Our infrastructure is falling far behind what the rest of the world is doing, and upgrading it is vital to our economy and our future competitiveness.
So what did Republican New Jersey Governor Chris Christie announce today? That he will now think about not canceling America's biggest transportation project, a tunnel, hundreds of millions of dollars already spent, doubling rail capacity into New York, already underway, the jobs of the builders hanging on it, to say nothing of money New Jersey might have to repay to the federal government, all of it hanging on Christie's decision. Let's turn first to MSNBC contributor Ezra Klein, also staff writer at The Washington Post and a columnist for Newsweek magazine. Ezra, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
You referred to the effect President Obama referenced there as the anti-stimulus. Can you explain that to Mr. Boehner if he's watching, what he's missing?
Absolutely. So in 2009, we passed a stimulus bill, a $787 billion bill. And contrary to what Mr. Boehner said, at that point, you see job losses begin to reverse. We're down at about 800,000 losing every month, and then it slowly modulates until we go up to positive job numbers in the early and mid part of 2010. But of course, the stimulus is ending now. We didn't do it for more than 2 years. And state and local governments are essentially collapsing. Their revenues are collapsing. And so they are now contracting. They're firing people. And just as when a business fires people, it adds people to the unemployment rolls. Mm-hmm. When a government fires people, it adds people to the unemployment rolls. And this, by the way, and it's important, is bad for business. The businesses will not invest until they think jobs are coming back and people can buy their stuff. And if jobs are not coming back because state governments are firing everybody, businesses won't really be able to hire either.
So with that, Republicans keep hammering what sounds like an intuitive argument. You can't borrow and spend your way out of a recession. We've heard this now for 2 years, ever since their recession started. Might be true at home over the kitchen table. Why is it not for a federal government?
Yeah, it simply doesn't work that way. So imagine an economy, right? You have three people who can spend. One is consumers, one is businesses, and one is the government. You have a massive financial crisis where consumers and businesses are taken out of the game. If the government steps back too, there is nobody to buy anything. If there's nobody to buy anything, businesses can't employ anyone. That means that no money goes to consumers, and neither businesses or consumers can get back into spending. Government needs to step in, not forever, but until the other two can get back on their feet. And right now, government did a good job of that right at the beginning, but because of Republican obstruction has taken itself out of the game for now, and we are seeing the consequences. We have, as Obama said, had 9 months of private sector growth, but it has been offset by public sector contraction. The government, the small government policy we're running here is essentially destroying the recovery.
And numbers, predictions for the state and local numbers for next year are worse. Mr. Obama's prospects for overcoming Republican opposition to another stimulus plan, obviously worse, no matter how the midterms turn out. Does America get any jobs back between now and 2012?
Hopefully some will come back. But look, this is a real dangerous chance of becoming self-perpetuating. If you don't move, if we continue having a sort of weakness in the market or the foreclosure crisis makes things worse, you'll have a situation where people are out of jobs for long enough that it becomes hard to reemploy them. Their skills deteriorate. Mm-hmm. It's what economists call hysteresis, and it may be what we're moving into. We're in a real dangerous place right now for government to walk out of the game. People remember the Great Depression ended after World War II. We don't need to have a world war, but we do need Congress to not decide it's time to give give up on the American economy.
And to that point, the debate in New Jersey about bailing out on this doubling of the rail capacity into New York City and the jobs that it would create in the short term and the jobs and infrastructure it would create in the long term. Can you explain that briefly to Governor Christie, who doesn't seem to get it?
It's horrifying, Keith. So infrastructure is the best deal in the economy right now. If you want to see where we've lost jobs, of course, it's construction because the housing sector collapsed. Raw materials are incredibly cheap. Concrete, steel, wood, it's all very, very cheap. And it's cheap for the government to borrow. So right now, the best thing we can do is invest in infrastructure. We will never have this good a deal again. And of course, we will need to rebuild our infrastructure in the future. So we've got a great deal here in the economy. We can employ exactly the people we need to employ. And Christie is stepping out of it. It's a terrible business decision for the government.
MSNBC contributor Ezra Klein, also of Newsweek and the Washington Post. As always, thanks for your time. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, who joins us tonight. Thank you for your time, sir.
Good to be with you, Keith.
Republicans fought job creation every step of the way. Now they're reaping the benefits, so it's mission accomplished, right?
Well, I tell you, it is incomprehensible to me that John Boehner would have the chutzpah to talk about jobs when in the Bush administration, after 8 years, they ended up losing 600,000 private sector jobs. During the Bush years, we lost 5 million good-paying manufacturing jobs, and they took us through their deregulation policies to the biggest financial collapse that we had since the Great Depression. So the idea of these guys talking about jobs is really incomprehensible.
Ezra Klein just reviewed how we got out of the Depression fairly succinctly. I thought no reason to go through it again. Does Mr. Boehner know about this? Is it something he was out that day in school? Is this ignorance or is it cynicism or what? How can he stand there and say you can't spend your way out of a recession or worse?
Keith, this is what they want to do. Right now, what they want to do is give $700 billion in tax breaks to the wealthiest 2% at a time when almost all income gains made in recent years have gone to the very, very rich, and the top 1% now earns more income than the bottom 50%. That's apparently not enough for Mr. Boehner. In my view, and in the view of many people in the Democratic caucus, what we should be doing is using a lot of that $700 billion for infrastructure improvement, rebuilding our roads, our bridges, our rail systems, our water systems. And when you do that, over a period of time, you're going to create millions of good-paying jobs. You do that by restructuring our energy system so we stop importing oil from Saudi Arabia and move to energy independence and sustainable energy. That's how you create jobs and make America stronger.
Senator, to paraphrase Mr. Limbaugh, do you think the Republicans want the people of this country and this country to succeed at the moment?
I'll tell you something. You know, I'm on the floor of the Senate a whole lot, and it astounds me that on every single issue of significance, no matter what it is, they are filibustering. Here they are. They tell us that they're the great supporters of small business. We brought together a small business bill which will provide affordable loans to businesses which desperately need them so they can expand, so they can create decent paying jobs, and we barely got any Republican support at all. So if you're asking me, do I think that the Republicans are more interested in creating jobs, expanding the middle class, or are they really interested in defeating anything that President Obama brings forth? Are they more interested in protecting the interest of their wealthy and powerful supporters? I would have to say the latter is true.
Well, of course, your small business bill addressed small-sized businesses with small profits, small numbers of employees, small business, mom and pop. Their idea and their definition of a small business is the Chicago Tribune. As we know, it's the number of owners. That is, again, can't say that too often. That is what the definition on the Republican side is of a small business. But let me ask you in sum, Senator, why are the Republicans, with this much of a shell game going on, why are the Republicans being rewarded for this at the polls?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the economy is hurting, and people are frustrated, and people want action. And in truth, the Democrats should have been more aggressive, should have been bolder. For example, the issue of outsourcing. The Democrats should have stood up from day one and said, you know what? No more jobs going to China. We're going to demand that corporate America reinvest in the United States of America and create good jobs here. We brought a bill to the floor last week. Finally, You know how many Republicans we've got who voted for the bill to protect us against outsourcing? You know how many? Zero.
Yep.
Not one. So I think this election really is a choice. And Boehner is right. It's whether we go back to the failed policies of the Bush administration or whether we demand that the Obama people become even more aggressive so we can pull us out of this Wall Street-caused recession.
Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, summing it up as usual. Thank you kindly, Senator. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.